everybody, and thank you for joining us here on Facebook Live. We're continuing our conversation now about workplace harassment with New York Times contributor and author of New Girl on the Job, Advice from the Trenches, Hannah Seligson, along with women's rights attorney and professor of sexual violence law at New England Law, Wendy Murphy. Okay, members of the audience, who has got a question for our guests? You know you're out there. People always get shy in this portion of the program, which is why I have this. Look, looking down. Yeah, you got one? No, okay. I'm going to kick it off if you don't mind then, okay? So I'll tell you, I think hiring an attorney is a great idea if this happens to you, because it's not necessarily reporting if you're too afraid to report, but it gives you somebody who can give you legal advice. However, it costs a lot of money.
No.
So answer that. What should somebody who doesn't have money do?
First of all, it doesn't cost money. Don't be afraid if you don't have money. There are lots of free lawyers out there. I do about 80% pro bono work through the Women's and Children's Advocacy Project at New England Law Boston. We provide free legal advice all the time. So don't be afraid of the money issue.
I think that was an offer.
It is an
Wendy
offer.
Murphy.
It's an offer. and also know that the reason it's important to get an attorney, and it has to be an external attorney, not an attorney connected to the company, obviously,
right,
is they can tell you about your rights that the company doesn't have an obligation to tell you about. For example, something that happens in the workplace, and this certainly applies to the Harvey Weinstein problem, is that it might be both an employment problem and a crime in the real world. And you have a right to know that. You have a right to access any and all legal resources, including the possibility of calling law enforcement, and a lawyer can help you figure that out.
Can I ask you whether you think that, are we at the beginning, I don't want to say we're in the full-blown midst of, because I don't know, but are we at the beginning of a sea change?
I'm optimistic.
This year?
I think we are. I think the fact that people had tried to break the story about Harvey Weinstein before and at the time succeeded on this round, I think indicates that things are changing. And then you also see this cascade effect. There was a waitress who came forward in the New York Post. We see Lauren's story. It's kind of amazing when you see how many people come forward after one person does.
All right, may I ask you a question in defense of Harvey Weinstein? Okay, because I was a lawyer for 10 years, as you know. With all the women coming forward and with him admitting that he has engaged in some sort of misconduct in his statement. So this is a unique, it's not, we're not unfairly condemning him. He has admitted that he regrets his behavior, that he came of age in the 60s and 70s and so on. But he hasn't admitted specifics. So what if, to play devil's advocate, what if some women come out of the woodwork looking to get a settlement without real allegations? What does a defendant do? Because I think there are some men out there who live in fear that they didn't do anything, but they're at this place in time where if somebody says they did, their goose is cooked.
Yeah, it's really important to be fair to especially guys in these high-profile situations where one woman comes forward and then some other not-so-legitimate victims try to jump on the bandwagon. It happens. Not often. It happens. And just to be clear, a guy like Harvey Weinstein has plenty of resources to be able to hire the attorneys to protect against those kinds of claims. False allegations are very rare. What we want to do is encourage women who've suffered to come forward and make sure that we are fair to whoever's accused of these offenses, because people with money are often targets, and I think they have the ability to defend themselves, but we also have to be cognizant of the fact that the one thing that motivates people to lie about all kinds of allegations is money.
Yeah, go ahead, Hannah.
We're also seeing this gray area, which makes me a little, maybe I'm going to backtrack my answer a little less optimistic. That, the Harvey's lawyer or advisor at the time, Amy Bloom, had said, "Oh, Harvey's just an old dinosaur." Lisa Bloom, I'm sorry. And we hear this from the president about locker room talk. I think there's this gray area of boys will be boys, and it is not taken seriously enough.
I think even women believe that to some extent, right?
I think women believe that.
Can I just ask you, if you feel comfortable, raise your hand if you feel you've ever been sexually harassed or put in that position? Yeah, a lot of women of my generation. I've gotten old enough that I can say that now. Because I really think that when we grew up, and I was born in 1970, like in the 90s, it's not that it was okay, it was just like, I wasn't surprised when my boss would hit on me.
Yeah.
We were like, yeah, dirty old man, that's what you think, and this is back when I was a lawyer. But then, I think we sort of came up in an era where it wasn't okay. It was just like something you had to deal with. Go ahead.
But one of the ironies of that attitude is that, especially for Weinstein's era, he describes it as something that happened and it was kind of normal back then, sexual liberation in the 60s and 70s. Here's what actually happened in the early 70s, 1972 in particular. The ERA was passed through Congress. Title IX was enacted. Women were being granted civil rights, protections against discrimination, which includes sexual harassment and assault. So the irony here that somehow back then it was acceptable was occurring at exactly the time in our legal history when women were being granted these unprecedented rights to full equality and protection against discrimination in the workplace. So I don't buy this idea that it was acceptable back then.
Well, and it's like, there's a difference between hitting on your employee and, allegedly doing that in a restaurant hallway, and like that's a totally different situation. But, to steal a line from that movie, The American President, remember that with Michael Douglas, with respect to Title IX? No, we really mean it now.
Yeah.
It's 2017 and we really mean it now. We're actually full, equal citizens who expect to be treated according to the law and with dignity. All right, before I wrap this up quickly, does anybody have a non-sexual harassment question that they want to ask? Anybody? You, sir, you want to talk about sexual harassment? Yes. Hold on, Alex is going to get you a microphone.
So as a man who was born in 1970 and someone that has 2 daughters and is focused on wanting to have a great environment for them as well as for all the women in here, what can we do as males to create the stereotype that we're looking for to personify for our friends and our sons so that this stuff is less prevalent in our society?
That's a good question.
Can I answer that as someone who's 6 months pregnant?
Best wishes! Yay!
I think that this standard has to be for women, and this is in part to our daughters. If you feel uncomfortable in any situation, that is enough. It doesn't have to meet some definition of someone touching you. That is enough to say something and to speak up, and that we just cannot tolerate women feeling uncomfortable in any situation, particularly the workplace.
But the next question is the hard one, which is, okay, I feel uncomfortable. Now what do I do? In the moment, what do I do?
Well, you speak up. That is the only
But every instinct inside of you is saying, I'm about to lose my entire career. Everything I've worked for is about to go away. If I reject him, if I challenge him, if I call him out.
But that's why it's so important to get an external attorney to help you through it. And the attorney becomes your support system as well. It's a lot easier to have an attorney on board. You don't feel alone. Smart thing to do. Inexpensive. Remember that whole thing about a free lawyer? I promise you there are free lawyers out there. But can I just say, not every offensive act is a federal case, right? All offensive acts that are based on sex should, in theory, be reported. But can I tell a quick story?
Yeah.
So when I was a young lawyer, my boss, as I was discussing with him a complex legal doctrine for a brief I was writing, he was talking to me. Well, actually, he was talking to my breasts. And
Been there.
As I'm interacting with him thinking, hey, this is a serious issue, he's still talking to my breasts. Now, I could have complained. I could have reported him. I could have gone to a lawyer in HR. But you know what I did? I stooped down, and I talked to his crotch.
No, you didn't.
I did.
Over here, sweetheart. Right here.
And it never happened again, and he became one of my favorite people. So there are other ways to deal with minor incidents. Minor incidents.
Yeah.
Serious incidents, call a lawyer. Minor incidents,
And keep a record.
creative.
Keep a record.
Always in writing. Always in writing.
Keep contemporaneous notes.
But to the gentleman's question, I think we do have to start this cultural shift, and it does start with your daughters and sons and daughters. And if we train people and parents send the message that you have to speak out, I am optimistic there could be a sea change in the next generation.
I just want to state for the record. So I've written about my own experience at Fox in my book. And I thought it was important to do that for other women. But when I got to Fox News and this began happening to me as a second-year reporter, I had practiced law for almost 10 years. I had practiced employment law. I knew exactly what my legal rights were, and I was still scared to speak up.
Yeah.
So I worry about making young women feel guilty or weak I just think it's easy, especially now in my position in this industry, to be like, go report. But now I'm established, and it's easy for me to say that now. I understand the reality of being a 20-something, or even in my case, I was 32 at the time, and feeling like, holy crap, like it's all, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And not feeling strong enough, to take on the king.
But the problem is people feel alone. You always think you're the only one. 9 times out of 10, if it's happened to you, it's happening to others. Right. There's never just one.
That is a good point.
I guarantee you it's never just one. But if you don't tell someone, at least an attorney, you'll never find out if you're alone. And when you speak up for yourself, you have to remember that under civil rights laws, you're speaking for all women. That's how important this issue is. Mm-hmm. These civil rights laws protect all of us. So if one person suffers a sexual assault and it gets reported, it benefits the rest of us, and it benefits men
it's
too.
It's like Kara Swisher, who's this amazing journalist out on the West Coast. She covers tech in Silicon Valley. She's like the one you talk to if you're in that industry. She's just sort of a badass all around, and I did a story on Silicon Valley women who had been getting harassed, and I talked to Kara as an expert on the industry, and I said, young women are afraid, they're afraid, and she said, I don't care, do it. You have to do it. You got to report. She kind of inspired me to be tougher, to say, yes, we've got to do it even though we're scared. And then I said, what about for the men who are out there still doing this, And she said, I'm going to get you. So go, Kara. Yes, quickly, I got to go.
But don't you think that it's also the onus is on management, too? I mean, we can't, I agree with you. We can't just put all of the responsibility on young women. That people in higher positions know about these things. They're open secrets. So
But can I tell you, I believe, I understand what they're reporting. For example, at my former place of employment, I don't believe it was an open secret. I think our detractors at Fox News wanted to say it was a situation like this. It was not. It was not an open secret. There was stovepiping at that organization in which we were not speaking to each other.
Right.
And even I, when it happened to me, went and looked for other women, none of whom said it had happened to them. I distinctly remember I went to one woman and said, Etty, have you ever had a situation? She was like, never, never, never. And then 10 years later, I find out she was one of the accusers. So people were scared and they weren't communicating. The systems are full of holes and they're imperfect at best. But I did go to a lawyer. I did make a record of it. I did tell a supervisor. And no change came about. But I protected myself. And in my case, I was so good they couldn't ignore me. That's always a good motto. Be so good they can't ignore you. It's a Steve Martin saying. Be so good they can't ignore you. With much love, you guys. Thank you. And to you, too. That wraps it up for today. Thank you very much for your questions. We'll see you soon.